What is going on, guys? Today we will be looking at what is next with the NFC North. This is a series I've gone through from now. We've already done all of the East teams and the South teams. Now we're hitting the North, and we'll finish up with the West. And, you know, it's a long series, but stick around. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. Check them out if you haven't seen them already. And also, make sure you like and subscribe. It does my channel a ton of help and doesn't cost you a single thing. So, let's get right into this video. But first, I got to let you know about my partnership with W Energy. Make sure you go to w.gg and use code SHREDDER, SHRD3R, for 10% off your order on W Energy products. They have really unique flavors. There's no artificial colors or dyes or hidden ingredients, anything. It's all there for you. Only costs around $1 per drink, so it's a lot cheaper than anything else you might get. So make sure to check out w.gg and use code SHREDDER to get a discount on your order. So here we are with the NFC North. Obviously, this entails the Bears, Vikings, Packers, and Lions. Let's get straight into this. So, starting off, the Bears. They were the worst team in this division and had a 7-10 record. They were projected to win 7.5 games and didn't quite get there, but were really close. They did start 2-7. They lost Justin Fields for a minute there. They have both the number 1 and number 9 overall picks in this draft, and there's questions about whether they'll use them both. What went wrong for this team, though, to not hit even just 7.5 8 wins or any more? Really, Justin Fields' development has stalled. There's not much going on there. They also do have some limited roster talent. However, let's not act like they have no roster talent. There's a lot of teams that have worse offensive talent, defensive talent, and worse weapons for their quarterback that did more. They did have some coordinating issues. Their defensive coordinator had to be removed middle of the season, or he left, and Eberflus took over the defense, which actually made them better. And their offensive coordinator had his issues to his own, and he got fired, long story short there. We'll go on to their new coaching staff. We start with Matt Eberflus, a guy who I wasn't too sure about prior to this, but now I'm kind of okay with him, I think. He really took over that defense, as I said, when they had to remove their DC, and they played well once he got there. It wasn't when Montez Sweat got there. It was kind of at the same time, but it was because Eberflus's play calls were just solid. He knows what to do with the defense, and that's good. Then, offensive coordinator, they bring in Shane Waldron from Seattle, the guy who kind of gave Geno Smith the new start to his career, and has a good offense that I think will really work for whoever they have playing quarterback, unless it's Justin Fields, because I just personally don't think he's all that good. Eric Washington's their defensive coordinator. He was promoted this year to that position. Going to the offensive unit. Things I want to start looking at first is obviously the quarterback position. You've got two guys here that played this year. Justin Fields, a guy that a lot of people are clamoring over, saying there's no reason that the Bears should give up on him. In my opinion, you absolutely should give up on him because quarterbacks get 3 years. He's not done enough in 3 years. Whoa, he's had no help. DJ Moore's pretty good, actually. He's actually a top probably 15 receiver in the league. Cole Kmet is a pretty good tight end. He's probably a top 10 to 15 tight end in the league. At least of last year he was. Darnell Mooney ain't great, but he's not terrible. Tyler Scott shown some flashes. It's not a great group. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that. But I did a Justin Fields video, and I pointed out there is 9 other teams with far worse weapons than anything Fields has. If Fields didn't run a less than 4.6 40, he wouldn't be a starter at this point. He just wouldn't be. No one would be arguing about it either. Tyson Bagent is another guy who he played in the regular season some when Fields got hurt. And there was an analyst on ESPN, I don't remember which one, who mentioned that Tyson Bagent has some things that Justin Fields could learn from. And people had an uproar about it because they were like, Tyson Bagent sucks. He's not nearly as good as Justin Fields. And I don't necessarily disagree. I don't think Justin Fields is very good, but I don't think Tyson Bagent is any better. I mean, that's for sure. However, Tyson Bagent knows how to let a play die. He knows how to just move on and go to the next one. Justin Fields gets himself in trouble by trying to do too much, and that's something Tyson Bagent didn't do. He knows how to throw a ball into the dirt at somebody's feet when you have to. It's just what it is. Cole Kmet, as I said, had a really good year. The offensive line is hated on a lot more than they should be. Braxton Jones, I'm not a huge fan, but he's okay. He's a spot starter, really. He's not terrible. Tevin Jenkins and Nate Davis are both very solid guards. Dan Feeney, Cody Whitehair kind of rotate in at center. They're fine, in my opinion. I mean, they're definitely upgradable, but nothing that's too crazy. I mean, there's teams with far worse center positions, that's for sure. To me, Darnell Wright was a huge reach in the draft last year. I don't know why they took him with some of the other guys on the board that they were. Peter Skoronski, Broderick Jones. I even liked Anton Harrison over this guy. And yeah, I mean, he didn't play that great, and it kind of shows because he just wasn't that high of a prospect. Going to the defensive unit now, there's not a ton here. Obviously, the Montez Sweat addition was huge in the middle of the season. Jalen Johnson, the secondary is actually not too bad. It's really the front four. I mean, you have just no names here. And, like, not that names matter, but you have to have quality players. Guys like Zach Pickens and Gervon Dexter, they're interesting to me, and I really would like to see them develop. I think they will develop into decent players. But you have a solid chance of losing Jalen Johnson this year, which sucks because he's been a really, really good corner. He's a guy who, you know, he's asked out for 2 years now, I believe. And if you think you're re-signing him, I just don't know, Chicago. You need to, but I don't know if you can. Jaquan Brisker's a solid player. Tyreek Stevenson, Kyler Gordon are also proven to be pretty decent at this point at the cornerback position. And you paid a lot of money last year to TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, which I think is pretty ridiculous considering the linebacker position just isn't that important. But you are where you are. This team isn't terrible. With Eberflus's play calls, this looked pretty solid, and they just got to keep expanding on it. So now, here's what this looks like in the offseason. Some of the free agents they have, Deontay Foreman, Darnell Mooney, Lucas Patrick, Robert Tonyan on offense, Yannick Ngakoue, Justin Jones, Rasheem Green, Jalen Johnson on defense. Some spot guys, and then Jalen Johnson is really what this looks like. The draft capital, they obviously have the 2 great first-rounders. They have a 3rd and 2 fourths and a 5th. They need, in my opinion, first a quarterback. They got to find a guy who can be the future because Justin Fields just isn't. I don't think he goes anywhere and proves that he is without massive, massive changes. Because the problem with Justin Fields isn't the play calling. It isn't this, that, and about the OC. It's he doesn't have good mechanics. He doesn't have good footwork. It's all stuff that he should have fixed by now on his own in the off seasons with quarterbacks coaches that he invested in himself. It's not on the coaches at this point. They have a lot of money. They do need to get more weapons, but at the same time, the quarterback position is what matters most, and that's going to trump here. They're going to need to try to re-sign Deontay Foreman and Darnell Mooney at least to a point for depth purposes. However, it's a numbers game. You don't want to spend too much, and they're not worth that much. Jalen Johnson, they absolutely should re-sign, but the question of can they is not entirely certain in my opinion. Round 1, to me, Caleb Williams is a no-brainer. Let's not overthink this. We're getting prospect fatigue. This guy is elite as a prospect. He is. And if you think he's not, you're wrong. Simple as that. You've just heard his name for 2 years, and now you just don't want to hear about it anymore. That's all it is. And then a pick number 9, you either go with the best wide receiver or the best edge available. That's just what it is in my opinion. Offensive line, defensive line, they need to hit those, and they can fill that out the rest of the draft and maybe in some free agency. So going forward, what can they do to improve? That does say Carolina. It means to say Chicago. Sorry about that. They need to get off of Fields. Anytime they spend with him from here on out is just wasted time. They need to develop around him, whoever him is. And the point is, Caleb Williams, really. I mean, that's kind of the point. I mean, are we really shocked? No. Caleb Williams will be the quarterback of the Bears next year if they are not stupid, which hasn't been proven to be a case that they aren't. But they have to add talent everywhere. Because, yes, they have some things, but this roster isn't that talented. Go get another receiver. Go get another edge rusher. Go get another corner. Go get, some defensive linemen, offensive linemen. Win the trenches. That's another big part. Realistic additions, obviously, Caleb Williams at 1. I'm not even going to list it any other way. I think that's where they go. Roma Dunze at 2, at number 9, or Dallas Turner is good there as well. There is a scenario that I do like where they kind of maybe pull a Houston Texans move from last year. Maybe at number 1, you go get Caleb Williams and then use a team like New England to trade up from 3 to 9 because New England might be willing to move back and go get Marvin Harrison. That way you have Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison, DJ Moore. I don't know how you can not like that. That anybody, even Justin Fields fans have to like that. Come on now. That looks insane. Jaden Daniels, Jared Verse together. Also, that could happen if they move back, from 1 to 3. If New England or maybe Washington want to move up to number 1. You grab Jaden Daniels, you grab Jared Verse, or Drake May, obviously. And then in free agency, this seems like a team that would spend on a running back. Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Christian Wilkins, and the defensive line. Those are all solid picks, in my opinion, if they could get them. So, next year, Caleb Williams, to me, it's a no-brainer. You have to go get Caleb Williams. It's the highest quality move you can make for your team. Josh Jacobs and Christian Wilkins would be amazing additions. I mean, I don't think you should pay a running back all that much. However, it would just make some sense to just get some talent on the offense and get a way to make the running game instantly better as soon as you can. So, we will go to the Vikings now. They were 7-10 as well. They did have a little bit of a tiebreaker getting them ahead. They lost Kirk Cousins. They lost Justin Jefferson. They had to play Josh Jacobs, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall, and just whoever else they had to play. I'm not even sure at this point. Their passing defense wasn't great. It's mainly because their secondary is not super talented. Madison was a guy who, the running back who, after Dalvin Cook left, he was supposed to be the next guy in line, and it just really didn't play out well. They had to make multiple trades and signings to get other places. The head coach, Kevin O'Connell, I'm a fan of. I think he will be a very good coach in the NFL for his entirety of his career. Offensive coordinator, none other than Wes Phillips, yes, related to Wade Phillips, if you're familiar. And Brian Flores, a great defensive coordinator that they're elated to have, that's for sure. Going to the offensive unit, obviously Kirk Cousins is at the back there. You've got him. You've got Josh Dobbs, who played well in spurts. You've got Alexander Mattison, who didn't do a whole lot for you this year in a really disappointing way. But on the other hand, you have Jordan Addison, who came in week 1 as a rookie and showed out really from the beginning. And especially when Justin Jefferson went down, things didn't get harder for him. It looked like they got easier because he was getting the ball thrown to him very often. You also have really good tackles in Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw. The interior offensive line's a little bit, you could improve it, but nothing too crazy. Defensively, you've got some things going. That's definitely for sure. I'm a fan of Byron Murphy Jr. I like the signing in the offseason, especially after losing Pat Pete. Cameron Bynum looks like a really good young safety. Ivan Pace, undrafted, came in, done really well. Daniil Hunter had a crazy good year. Andrew Booth is a guy who they kind of whiffed on, and I hate it because he was a guy, I hate it, but I love it for me because I wanted the Steelers to draft him whenever he was up, but didn't really play out the best for them or, just the scenario they've been in. Marcus Davenport, another guy they signed, did not get the best year out of him, and it is what it is on that note. So, looking at their offseason, 5 positions in need. To me, you have to hit that defensive interior and then the cornerback room very quickly. You have multiple picks in 4th and 5th round. You don't have a 3rd or a 7th, but that's fine. But you have a lot of free agents. Looking at this, Kirk Cousins, that's a major decision. Do you think he's going to be worth it to come back for another year or two? KJ Osborne, Brandon Powell, 2 guys who stepped up in the absence of Justin Jefferson. And, both were solid receivers. I think you have to look to bring back at least one. Daniil Hunter, Marcus Davenport, sucks that you're losing both of your starting edge rushers this year. Daniil Hunter, he's a guy who, does he want to come back? You bring him back, but does he want to? That's the big question. And then Wanham and Hicks, those are depth pieces. They have $28 million, $29 million in cap. They can do things here. So to me, here's what you do. Round 1, doesn't matter what you pick, you got to pick defense. Whether it's Cooper DeJean, Jerzon Newton, whoever you can, Kool-Aid McKinstry, anybody at the defensive positions, go get them. In round 2 and 3, round 2 and both the 4th, you have to hit some interior linemen or some more defense, really, because this defense is not great. And if you have them with that offense, if the offense stays healthy, you have options to maybe win some legitimate games. And then you can invest in some talent late. But to me, I think you have to bring back Kirk Cousins. I just don't see a way you get a better option right now. Dalton Risner is not a bad guard. I wouldn't mind bringing him back. KJ Osborne, Brandon Powell, one of those 2 bring back. I would lean to KJ Osborne if he wasn't too expensive. And Daniil Hunter, you have to try. No way about it. Minnesota can improve this year by figuring out Kirk. That's number 1. Figuring out that and also tacking on investments into the secondary because if you don't have that defense looking any better than they were, you're not going to get anywhere, especially with the emergence of guys like Jordan Love, Jared Goff, guys playing a lot of good football in your conference and also your division. They need to figure out the running game as well as it's kind of lackluster this year. But they can realistically add guys like Terrion Arnold, Jerzon Newton, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Cooper DeJean, as I mentioned earlier. Or in the second round, you go, first round you go Terrion Arnold. Second round, you hit Chris Jenkins out of Michigan. That'd be a great one. Zach Frazier, Michael Penix in the second round. Those are also options because I think Penix does not go in the first. Kendall Fuller, C.J. Henderson, Tim Settle, all veteran guys who, at this point, they're just talent you could add. And I think that's kind of how they go about it. They go get a guy like Tier Tart or Tim Settle, Kool-Aid McKinstry in the first, Michael Penix in the second, kind of preparing for the future a little bit since Kirk is a question mark. That would not be a bad idea in my opinion. Going into Green Bay now. They went 9-8, and, they upset Dallas in the wild card round, but lost to San Francisco in a short game. What went wrong for them? To me, not much. This is another one of those teams that they're just not there yet, and what they did was honestly more than they should have. So be happy for this year. If you really thought y'all could go to the Super Bowl this year, just be a more realistic fan next year around. Jordan Love's first half of the season didn't help. He was very iffy. He started like the first game and a half, 2 games, really, really well, and he looked like he was going to be great, but then he just kind of tanked off there for the next 6-7 weeks, and then shot right back up, finishing with like 18 touchdowns and 1 pick in the last 9 games or something around that numbers. I'm not exactly sure if I'm misquoting that. They also had some questionable defensive calls, which led them to fire their defensive coordinator. Bringing now is Jeff Hafley, the new DC. Adam Stenovich is the OC, and Matt LaFleur is still the head coach. No shock there. Nothing too much changed other than the DC. Offensively, the unit is lackluster, honestly. And what Jordan Love was able to do is that much more impressive because of how little talent he had around him. This is a team that has less options than the Bears, and Justin Fields still did far less than one-year Jordan Love. Jordan Love obviously had a good year in the grand scheme of things. Going to the running back position, Emmanuel Wilson was a guy who really showed out in his limited stretches that he got the ball. Both tight ends, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, looked really interesting. I was a little confused of why they took back-to-back tight ends in the draft last year, but at the same time, they're both solid players, so I was like, okay, I mean, they'll make it work. I guess you're trying to have the safety nets really covered for Jordan, and that's what it was. Jaden Reed also had a heck of a rookie year. Christian Watson's a guy who wasn't able to stay healthy, which is a little concerning, but we'll see it later, as well as David Bakhtiari. He's a guy you might look to move off of because of the cap numbers, his inability to stay healthy recently. There's a lot of factors going into that. And Zach Thomas, the other tackle, played extremely well this year as a guy who doesn't really have much of a resume so far to this point in his career. But he played very well this year, and that is what it is. Defensively, it's a unit, that's for sure. Talent-wise, they're there. To me, Carl Brooks, if you remember my draft content, that was a guy I loved, and I thought he was as talented as a third rounder, and he fell all the way to like the 6th or 7th, and he looked like he had some good potential this year in the league. I'm ready to see what he's able to do. They do have kind of a depth-ridden defensive line, though, so he's not going to get a ton of options right now, but it'll be fine in the long run. Lucas Van Ness was their first-round pick, who didn't get a whole lot of run, but I bet he does get some here in the next few years very quickly. Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, guys who are a little older. I mean, Rashawn Gary's pretty young, but Preston Smith, a guy they'll replace him with Lucas Van Ness. Devondre Campbell, definitely a down year, as well as Quay Walker. Not what you want to see from these guys, especially when Devondre Campbell was an all-pro in the not-too-recent, past. Or not too distant past, excuse me. Rashawn Gary's one of the premier edge rushers in the league. He's just there. Darnell Savage had a really good year as a safety. But the cornerback room's a little concerning here. You've got Keyshawn Nixon, who's a free agent. You've got Carrington Valentine, who's a young guy. But Jair Alexander looks to be on the way out of Green Bay. And for better or for worse that may be, it's still talent lost one way or another. And we'll see what happens there, but that's not just a good thing in general for Green Bay. In this year's draft, they do have a first, 2 seconds, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. To me, they need a cornerback number 1. They need a linebacker number 2, or a receiver number 2. Either one, you could flip those back and forth just to get more talent in that receiver position, unless you really think that your guys are going to grow, like Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. Free agent-wise, A.J. Dillon, Josh Nijman, Bo Melton, those are all guys on offense that they're replaceable. I'm not worried about them. Keyshawn Nixon, Darnell Savage are 2 guys that you might be like, okay, we kind of need to work on something there, whether it's them coming back at lower numbers or just, replacing them with other veteran talent. Eric Wilson had his run this year, was okay at best. Jonathan Ford, replaceable, definitely. What I think they need to do here, round 1, they need to go get a corner. That's first and foremost, because if they lose Jair Alexander especially, that's going to be a problem. Then wide receiver and O-line have to be hit. Linebacker, it is important, and they do need them, but it's just not an important position in the NFL anymore. Round 4 will be a place where you can get a linebacker that's almost as good as a linebacker from round 2. They're an overrated position at this point and not needed. So that's why they are a big position in need, but they're not going to be highly, recruited to this team this offseason, in the draft at least. Now, how can they improve this year? Really, it's going to be figuring out that secondary, make sure that defense is all wrapped up. Then you got to give Love some love. Give him some help. Receiver position. The running back position will come into question as A.J. Dillon is a free agent this year and Aaron Jones is a free agent next year. Got to figure that out. Figure out the O-line. The offensive tackles especially. That's a rough position right now. Not a great look. That's for sure. You got to figure things out on defense and just help out Jordan Love. That's for sure. Realistic additions for them. Ennis Rakestraw Jr., that's a good corner from Missouri. And Quinion Mitchell, I'm not a huge fan of. He did show out at the Senior Bowl, but personally, I haven't watched a ton of him. I'll have to do more, but I don't know. I don't feel right about him at this point, but he will probably be a late first-round guy. Tyler Nubin, Edgerrin Cooper, Peyton Wilson, all guys they might be able to hit in the second round. And then going out and getting a veteran receiver could be a very, very good move for this team. Mike Evans could have some intrigue to go play with a guy like Jordan Love if he looks like he's on the up and up for real. Gabe Davis, same situation. T. Higgins as well. Next year, Green Bay, if they get Mike Evans, go get Quinion Mitchell, Peyton Wilson in the 3rd, 4th round. That's a solid unit and solid upgrades. They got to figure out that tackle position too, but they'll get there one way or another. I'm not worried about it. And our final team, the Detroit Lions, came into this season with a ton of hype, but they went 12-5, and that's great. 9.5 wins was their projection, and it was pretty solid. I mean, definitely for sure. They lost in the conference championship to San Francisco on some bad calls. I don't agree with that. I mean, yeah, you are aggressive. Maybe you don't go for it the second time, but the first one, I don't have a problem with that. What went wrong? They did implode. It was really the defense that imploded. And the reliable guys fell out. Guys like Josh Reynolds, who were reliable all year long, went from being that reliable guy to being just almost a loss. It would have been better if he wasn't on the field in the playoffs. The Niners game specifically. And then the defense, there's not a whole ton of talent there. They have to gain more there. And we'll get into that in a moment. Head coach is still Dan Campbell. Offensive coordinator is still Ben Johnson, surprisingly. And Aaron Glenn is the defensive coordinator. That didn't change either, I don't believe. The offensive unit, to me, it's decent, but it's not great. I mean, you have Jared Goff. That's a very solid quarterback. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, really solid 1-2 punch. However, they're just not amazing. Jahmyr Gibbs could definitely be amazing, but neither of them are a top-tier back at this point. They're just very, very solid, both. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, but that's really it in the receiving core. Josh Reynolds is an average, fine guy. Jameson Williams, shown upside, but can't stay on the field for more than 10 minutes at a time. I'd love to see it, but we got to see it. Khalif Raymond, Peoples-Jones are fine depth, but you're not really elated over those. A number 2, a legitimate number 2 would not hurt anything at all. You do have Sam Laporta, who looks to be a really, really good tight end. Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell are solid tackles. Not to mention you have Frank Ragnow, one of the best centers in the league. Graham Glasgow, Halapoulivaati Vaitai, and Jonah Jackson are a really good 3-section of guards. I mean, you can play any 2 of them and be pretty good. And then Dan Skipper is a 6th lineman if you just want to have one. That's great too. As I've said here, I've pretty much already gone over all these guys. They are what they are. The defense is kind of the problem here. As you look through the starters, you see John Kaminsky, Benito Jones, Derek Barnes, who wasn't, I don't believe, a full-time starter, but he was what he was. Kirby Joseph, just not the best players overall. You've got some spots here that are really solid. Aiden Hutchinson is really good. He's going to be really good one way or another. Aleem McNeil, he showed out this year, that's for sure, but before this point, he wasn't much. Jack Campbell was an overrated pick at the time, and now he's extremely underrated, played very well. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, when he's on the field, is good. Afitu Melifonwu had a really great season statistically. Brian Branch, another really good player that's young. Cameron Sutton is very solid, but not, you're not just like saying that's CB1 right there. But there's things to improve on, no doubt about it. This year in the draft, they have pretty much all their picks. Nothing missing there as well. Free agent-wise, though, basically all 3 of their guards, and you've got to bring back somebody. They have multiple secondary losses, which is going to be a problem considering it's already, not the most talented group. You don't want to just keep losing people. C.J. Gardner-Johnson is a solid player. Emmanuel Mosley, he didn't get to play much. I bet they bring him back at a low number. Kendall Vildor, Jerry Jacobs, both depth talent, but guys you can't just lose without replacement of anything. They need a cornerback. They need an edge really bad. That might be where they go round 1, even though they may need cornerback first. And they have $50 million cap. So, I mean, there's a lot to work with. That's for sure. To me, round 1 is CB edge, and round 2 is vice versa. So if you go, round 1 and you go get Kool-Aid McKinstry, then round 2, you go get Chop Robinson. Or if round 1, you go, let's say, Laiatu Latu falls a little bit, you get him. Round 2, you go with I'm trying to think of a second-round corner right now, and I'm just completely blanking. But guys that maybe slip a little bit, Quinion Mitchell, Ennis Rakestraw, those are back in first-round guys, really. But that's all I can pull out of my brain at this moment. Either way, Josh Reynolds, you consider bringing back just because of the depth, and he has been decent before. The guards, you have to bring back at least 1, maybe 2. And then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson or Emmanuel Mosley, one of those 2 has to come back at least, and maybe even both. Going forward, they need secondary help very bad. Whether it's what they had last year or the losses they're taking this year, both are going to be major issues, things you got to fix. They need an edge mate for Hutchinson because one guy coming off the right side, well, you just push everything to the left. it's just going to make it, not that hard to get around. They need some wide receiver depth for sure. Round 1, they could realistically go grab Kamari Lassiter or Quinion Mitchell, or Darius Robinson, Braylon Trice, Jonah Ellis. All those guys are, 1-2 guys in the first, second round. Chase Young, Josh Allen, Jalen Johnson, those are also another way to go. Maybe you hit Chase Young or Josh Allen in free agency, or Jalen Johnson, and then you can just focus on the other position in the draft, and that would be really nice as well. That's what I kind of have going here. You go get Josh Allen. That'd be an awesome 1-2 punch with him and Aiden Hutchinson. Then go get Kamari Lassiter, and then maybe round 2, 3, get Mike Sanderstill to play the slot position, or maybe just be your jack of all trades guy with Brian Branch. That would be a heck of a unit back there in the secondary. So what do you think is next for the AFC North, or the NFC North, excuse me? This is a division that, there's a lot of change happening right now, lots of turnover, lots of potential turnover. Let's see what happens with them. Let me know in the comments what you think about your favorite team, or a team that maybe you don't even are a fan of. The outside perspective is very interesting because you don't have the biases that other people do. Either way, I'll catch y'all on the next one.